Bessie, and welcome to Bridging the Realm. Today, we're going to be discussing a very interesting topic, which I've been waiting for quite a long time to discuss on my channel, and that's to do with energy work, healing, abundance manifestation, and anything to do with healing of the emotional body, extrasensory abilities, which are all just things that I find really, really interesting and really want to get my teeth into. So I'm really excited to welcome my amazing guest, Jasmin-Lalani Fejerang. She is a life coach, a healer, a oracle card reader, and a Reiki master whose mission is to assist people on their ascension path. Her work includes things such as subconscious reprogramming, helping people to manifest their true abundance, and healing their emotional bodies from past trauma in order to realign them with their highest potential. She describes herself as a new generation old soul coming down on earth to help assist human and planetary ascension. So quite a big mission, and I'll be really interested to hear more about that. So Jasmine, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
I'm great, Desi. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Well, as good as can be right now in the lockdown that we're in. So just yeah, how is it there on your side?
Everything's good here. When we were in quarantine, my life really didn't change too much. I'm really out in the woods, or actually in the valley, but I'm really far from a lot of people. I'm originally from Southern California, so I'm used to the hustle and bustle and San Diego and Los Angeles and stuff like that. But I just decided that I wanted to make a move in 2020, and so now I'm out in nature, and it was really perfect timing because this quarantine happened, this lockdown, and it was kind of just all divine alignment for me to just be in solitude and really work on my own self-healing now more than ever with, these times changing. So not really too much of a difference for me. How's everything there?
Here it's good. Unfortunately, I'm stuck in the city in London, so it's been, I mean, it hasn't been too difficult. Like where I live, it's kind of okay. It's just, I guess the main thing is, you can't really go to places that you normally go to, and the shops, you have to wait for like an hour sometimes to get something. So yeah, it's been weird, but I think we're kind of almost at the end of it now, as far as I know, hopefully. But yeah, hopefully it's gonna normalize soon. Yeah. But
They're saying that they're gonna open back up depending on the governors, depending on the states. But they said that the president has said that on May 1st, he's leaving it up to the governors to see if they want to open up or like have a soft opening, just to help the economy because it's really crashing right now in America.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much everywhere, isn't it? So I think everyone's kind of intensely waiting to see how this plans out. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, I guess there's a blessing in every sort of negative thing. So I guess
Yes,
there's also
definitely.
quite a bit of change. And like you just mentioned, you've been focusing a lot of on your own self-healing and stuff. So tell me a bit about that, and what does that look like for you? Because I've been doing kind of the same, and obviously I mean, I'm not living alone. I have my flatmate with me, but a lot of the time I am by myself, and kind of I have focused on a lot of this kind of emotional stuff and what's coming up for me. Okay, it needs to be healed. Okay, I need to integrate. So what does that look like for you? What have you been kind of dealing with recently?
Well, it's always such a process, and it's always like an evolution of that ritual or that healing process. And so for me, I started my awakening, really it began in 2012, but I just had a huge catapult in 2015. And then since then it's just progressed. And then 2018, it's kind of like those years where it's a lot of awakening and ascension and integration and DNA activation and all of that crazy stuff that we experience in our body and our mind and, through our spirit. So those were like the pivotal years. And then now we're in 2020, and this has been probably the most catapult of ascension energy that I've been experiencing, especially on a collective level too, because of what we're going through. Everyone is really stuck at home. So we're kind of not really forced, but more gravitated towards our own healing and, you know, staying within, looking within. Now that we're staying at home, we can't watch Netflix all day. So why not learn something new or something that we've been or something, you know, that we're interested in. And so for me, what my healing looks like right now is every morning I do my morning meditation, and that really has helped me a lot because, you know, it's like I said, in 2012 I started my awakening, but I wasn't doing meditation every day. I wasn't like doing yoga and becoming vegan and all of these different stuff. It was like more of a natural process for me in an organic way. So it's kind of like my soul initiated into now meditating every morning because it really helps attune my frequency into something more higher than lower. When we wake up, I feel it's extremely important, especially for subconscious reprogramming, that we do get into a deep state where we can control our emotions or control where our frequency lands once we wake up or once we start the day. So I wake up every morning, do my meditation. I always have my coffee. But I started doing something really cool. You know, MCT oil, have you heard of it?
No, what's that?
MCT oil is just something you can get like at the drug food store. It's really like an oil that's derived from coconut oil, and I think maybe something else. I'm not too sure, but it promotes brain health. And people who are on the keto diet, they have like these healthy fats that they need. And so it's really important for people on keto diet or anyone who just needs that healthy fats, you know, for the body. And so it really helps promote brain health. And so I'm drinking my coffee in the morning, and I'm either before or after my meditation. And I've noticed that it's actually boosted my mood, and my meditation has been a lot clearer too by adding this MCT oil. So I love that. And
Is that like a big thing there in the US, or is it?
not really. It's just maybe if you're into supplements or herbal remedies or holistic, you know, living diet and stuff. I mean, I still, you know, have my cravings, like my chips and stuff. So I'm not very strict on my diet, but I do like to implement vitamins or things like that. Another thing that I love is zinc. And maybe like taking that every morning in the mouth. It's like in droplets, like you can get it in liquid, but that also helps for the ascension too, because with the ascension, you know, with DNA activation, what DNA activation means in a more grounded term is really our DNA is carbon based. And so it's really transforming into the crystalline structure now, where, you know, the telepathy is stronger, or the intuition, the third eye activation is stronger. So zinc really helps the body to process the ascension and just be healthy overall.
Oh, wow, you sound really on top of your health and supplements.
Oh,
That's so
thanks.
good. Yeah, I should definitely try more of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
zinc is awesome.
Wow. Okay. So that's like your daily routine where you basically start the day with a meditation. So if you don't do that in one day, if you just miss it, do you feel it straight away? Do you feel like, oh, I
Um,
missed the meditation, I can feel something, you know?
no, not really. I used to really be like, I have to do this every single day. But then I found that balance where it was like, if I didn't do it, that's okay. You know, it's just about flowing through it. But also, it's really important to keep that mental discipline, because we do know this is for self-care. This is, you know, investing in ourself, body, mind, and spirit. So I try not to, but if things happen, you know, life happens. If I have to go run out to the grocery store really quick, then I don't mind it. But when I do forget it or something happens, I do make it an effort sometime in that day to do maybe 5 or 10 minutes, even if I'm just driving or something. Because really, for me, and the way I like to explain meditation is that the reason why I feel it's important is, one, you know, you're doing the conscious breath, but it's allowing you to control your emotions and your frequency. And so it's allowing you to have that power and knowing and worthiness that we can lift ourselves up. It's all about us. Like the way that we're perceiving everything, the way that our reality is all based on us, what's happening internally. So, yes.
Wow, that's such a key thing, and I love the way you described it in terms of controlling our emotions, because I think right now especially that's so important for us to control our emotions, because yeah, I mean, with everything going on, people are kind of going a bit haywire and our emotions are all over the place, and if you're not in that center, then it's kind of just like your emotions are just ruling you completely, isn't it? So
Right. And maybe, I think maybe controlling, because now that I'm thinking about it, may not be the right term, but it's kind of just being aware of
where
those emotions and being able to shift that. Like seeing that opportunity of, why am I feeling this low frequency? Why am I feeling this fear or this sadness? And once we figure that out, then we can come to terms with the reasoning, and therefore then we can raise. So
yeah, definitely. So what well, actually we'll get to that later, but tell me a bit about your story. How did you start all of this? Like, how did you, I'm always curious to find with people who are doing this type of work, you know, when was the first time you realized that you had these abilities, and like you're really gifted, you know, you're a healer, you do energy work, you do card readings, amongst loads of other things. When, you know, what was it like growing up and kind of having these abilities? Did it scare you, or was it something that was quite natural and you knew? Yeah, tell me a bit about that.
okay, so when I was young, I've always felt that, you know, maybe I feel something there, or I mean, I think I kind of knew. Just as a child, I felt I kind of knew a lot of things. But as I went through childhood and kind of early adulthood, teenage years, middle school years, was kind of the years where I started to forget everything. It was like the veils. Like that was a time where all the veils started to cover on me, because the illusions of, you know, what girls should look like, or the body types and the way that they should act and stuff like that. And I've always been different, even as a child. And so when I went into middle school and high school, I tried to conform myself into these, like, I love to dance, so I had to act like a dancer, or like a hip hop dancer. I had to be all hip hop, but I was not always all hip hop, you know? And so I would just always fit into these boxes. But then I always noticed, you know, I'm more than just this box of hip hop, or more than just a dancer or journal writer, whatever. Even like rebel, and I started to go into raves and stuff. So there was just a lot, you know, high school years that ended up making me have a lot of veils. I'm covering myself, because I was covering myself with these illusions that I thought I had to be this or that or that. And so 2012 was when I graduated high school and I went to college, and then college is crazy. So then more partying and stuff like that. And so I started to realize, you know, I think there has to be something. And I really think it was that collective shift of the 2012 mark, where everyone thought the world was going to end. And I think that sparked me to be like, wait, I think there's more. There has to be more. And so that happened. 2012 was a big year. Then in 2015, I had my son, and I had a home birth with him. And in 2015, I was, you know, still partying and stuff before I knew that I was pregnant. And at that time, I was eating McDonald's every day, like 2 a.m., drinking every other day, probably. So I was not like in the most healthiest mindset and lifestyle. But when I found out I was pregnant, it was crazy, because that moment where I felt like a seed inside of me was, I tell people, it was like there was a seed that was planted inside my consciousness, because it just began to grow. Like as soon as like my belly was getting bigger, I felt like my consciousness was just really getting bigger. I was just becoming more aware of vaccines and people who have been affected by it. Even I was thinking about conventional schooling, like the schooling system, and versus homeschooling. So it was kind of just preparing me for like this motherhood of knowing like what is real and what is not real. Even though that the society is telling us do this, I just felt it wasn't right. And so the first thing where I felt that I really trusted myself was when I made that decision to have a home birth. Because something inside of me, and again, I was not in the most healthiest position, but something inside of me told me that doctors like would manipulate me, knowing my past, knowing that I've done marijuana and recreational drugs and drinking all the time. They would label me and they would see me in a certain way when I've already been doing my research. Like it just opened up this whole world for me. So I already felt that I would be taken advantage of, or I would be overlooked at. And so that's why I decided, I think I'm just going to do a home birth. Like, I really trust myself. And then I just kept on replaying in my head, you know, my ancestors have done it. Why not now? You know, in 1950s, which was just 2 generations ago for me, they were making people do C-sections. Like, they were kind of like forcing them into C-section. And that's not something I resonated with, because just if you go 3 generations back, they were probably having midwives all the time, like back on the island, because I'm Filipino and Guamanian. So it's all island out there. It's, you know, they brought the Western culture, but back in the day, when the way the ancestors were, they would just give birth outside or at home, and they would have the midwives. So I wanted to experience that. And once I did that, I knew that I could do anything. So that was really the big spark of my awakening.
Wow, that sounds amazing. And I mean, even at that age, it's amazing that you trusted your instincts and your intuition to tell you that, no, you should have, it's better for you to have home birth at this time. That's, I think that, yeah, that requires a lot of courage. Wow. Amazing.
Yes, it
That all
did.
went well because you have your son now.
Oh, it was perfect. My birth was 6 hours long, and usually for a first-time mother, it's between 12 to 18 hours. So I popped him out like that. The next day, just like hours after birth, I was walking around. I wanted to go take him to the beach already, but my family's like, no, stay home. But everything was just really well. I didn't need stitches or anything. I just healed normally. To be honest with you, since that home birth, I've actually have not seen a doctor, except for, yes, except for when I did a cosmetic surgery. But other than that, it had nothing to do with my health.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. Well, that just
Yeah,
shows you, isn't it, that when you know something, you know that that's what's good for you. But
exactly.
but
Yeah.
it's so hard to actually have the courage to trust your instinct and to, go along with it, because most people don't. Most people are just like, no, I should go to the have a normal birth in a hospital. So
Yes, and I also feel like when people do experience situations like that, where do I listen to myself, my gut, my intuition, or should I just do what everyone's telling me? And so that right there, when someone has an opportunity in that situation, I feel that is moments of initiation. That's moments of you really either surrendering, or we're going to have to learn that cycle again. We'll give you another big opportunity. But once we're given these opportunities and we full on just surrender, like, okay, I'll just trust myself, then we just catapult in our spiritual ascension for sure. Yes.
True. Oh, wow. I have to say, I find it the hardest thing. I found it the hardest to trust my intuition. And I think most of the time, I guess I've been so disconnected that I don't even get to hear it so much. Or, when I do hear, I'm kind of like, oh, I'm imagining. And then when I do hear, I'm kind of like, again, I don't trust it. So it's so, well, what advice would you give to people out there who kind of like, they have a similar issue, and they have the intuition kind of knocking on the door every now and then, but they're just not listening. How can they get in touch more with that side?
Remember how in the movies, like back in the day, they would have someone, and then in the dialogue in their head is like the angel or the devil. And so what I like to try to help my clients understand is we want to make them work in unison. Like, instead of having them in left and right, we want to make them like top and bottom, in alignment. And so the angel voice is kind of like the higher self. It's more of like a light, faint voice. It's not very direct. The ego voice is like, no, 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 you shouldn't do that. Remember, blah, 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 blah. All of these things are trying to make us logical. But once we begin to really use them together, we always listen to the higher self, and we use the ego voice for discernment. So maybe even like figure out the characteristics of the dialogue inside of the head, because everyone has dialogue in the consciousness. Even by me talking and you're listening, you have still dialogue in your head. You're thinking of it, it's processing. And so I just tell people, really listen to the characteristics. If something's more direct and very forceful, it's probably an egoic voice. If it's something it's more light, more dainty, yes or no, or something where it's just more have like a a grander presence that's usually the higher self. So what I try to help people understand is listen to that, listen to the higher self, but use those direct voices to understand why she's saying that, or why the higher self of him is saying that. I hope that helps. Does that make sense?
No, it does. Perfect sense. Yeah. And that's
Perfect.
actually kind of how I've experienced it. I've noticed that when it was my intuition and my higher self, it was kind of like very quiet, and it will only give me this sign once, or, maybe
Yeah.
a few times, but it's very kind of, it's not loud, like you said, like the ego is like, no, or it will say something very hurtful, like, you why you're so stupid, why did you just do that? Whereas the higher
Right.
self would be more like, no, just don't do it, that's it. And there's no emotion behind it, so there's no like panic or you can't
Right.
do that. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like a grander presence
Yeah.
because it doesn't speak as much. Something that has to state a point has to like talk and talk and talk and talk, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, true. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, very true. Wow, thank you. That was really helpful.
oh,
Um,
good.
and okay, so what were the first things that drew you to this world? Because like you were saying, you were kind of like doing dancing and trying to fit yourself into all these boxes. What was the first thing that you researched and you were kind of like, oh, that feels like me, or this is like my area that I should look into?
Okay, so I would say in 2015, when I had my baby, I decided that I wanted to look into energy healing because when I gave birth inside of my home, you have to or people have to understand from a spiritual standpoint, you're opening up the door, like this is opening up a portal for like life and afterlife, or life and before life. That veil is very thin, especially when a baby's coming down the canal. It's a very spiritual experience, especially a home birth. The natural home birth, when I had no medication, it's a very spiritual experience. And so I started to, when he came out, my clairvoyance kind of kicked in, and I started to just see density meaning like darker energy. So I would just see like black clouds or like a black energy walking by, in certain parts of the house. So I go, I really need to learn how to clear my home. I really need to learn energy healing to clear my space, because now that I'm a mother, I need to protect myself and my baby. And so I learned about energy healing through like clearing space, like sage.
Mm.
And then
Did
I
it not
just
scare
Googled.
you when you saw these things? Did you not think, oh my God, I'm being
I
haunted? Something.
I did get scared, but I did know that the reason for that was because I did open a portal of like life and afterlife, or life and before life. Usually, like in a hospital, there's tons of spirits running around there, because that's like a bridge, that's a portal of energy for, spirit and physical body to contact. So
Yeah.
I knew that was just because I gave a home birth. I should have properly did a ritual after, but I had no idea. But again, this was like an opportunity gifted to me. Like this scary experience was gifted to me to now learn about energy healing. And so I Googled energy healing in Temecula, because I was in Temecula, California. And I just saw Reiki, and I was like, well, what's Reiki? And I just saw it was energy healing, and I took a class and I fell in love with it. And that's when I knew, oh, for sure, I'm a healer. It was just like that moment, kind of like I said, that initiation, that opportunity where I was scared and I didn't know what to do. Well, by me like putting myself out there and learning something, it really initiated me to be like, wow, this is it. Like this is something that opened a big door for me.
Wow.
So,
Wow,
yeah.
that's quite a big initiative.
And then, oh, so to answer your question, so then I went through those years, like I said, 2012, 2015. Then in 2018 was a big spiritual awakening for me, because between those years, I felt like I was dealing with a lot of my darkness, like my insecurities, especially body issues, because I just had a child. And so I ended up working out and really just overexerting my body, because my emotions were telling me otherwise. They were telling me like, no, this isn't good enough, more, more, more. And then it ended up leading me to bodybuilding, which was amazing. And it helped me learn a lot about my masculinity and what I can really do with my body. But still, it wasn't helping my emotional energy. It was just draining it. And so after bodybuilding, I said, like, I'm done. And I decided to go to Mount Shasta. And when I went to Mount Shasta was when I had this huge spiritual awakening. And I've just been about my awakening ever since. I've made it my first priority in my life, is my ascension process.
Wow, that sounds like you've been in quite a journey for all of that.
Yes,
But it
definitely.
seems like you've just learned so much in such a short amount of time. Because yeah, I mean, 2012 was 8 years ago, and then 2015. So wow, yeah, that's quite a lot.
Yes.
So tell me about, because you do a lot of energy work, and sort of you talk about morphogenic healing in your on your website as well. In your as a life coach, I think you do that. Um, Tell me a bit about that, and what do you understand under energy healing, and why it's so important? Why is it that it's important for us to work on the energetic level and not just on the physical, like you just said, bodybuilding, but there's a deeper level, beneath that, isn't
Yes.
it? So why is it important that we actually address those parts as well?
So, I do my energy healing, and then I have my life coaching. And energy healing was something that kind of evolved into my life coaching, because with my life coaching, I really tell people of why energy healing is so important for the body and things like that. And as being, doing bodybuilding and having to be very strict and very active, and also feeding my body certain things that my body needed. So I went through that whole process. And so now that I went to this other side of just meditation, just water, and whatever my body needs, like being completely free flow, I really realized that it really depends on the energy that's circulating within the body. No matter if you are, working out and doing whatever you want for a body look, it really is depending on the energy that's around us and that's circulating our body, which means frequency. The higher frequency that our body is, the more that everything can flow and circulate more. And so I feel it's really important, diet of obviously not eating McDonald's every day and chips, but it really is, that's balance. Diet, I feel, is balance, but really it's focusing on how is everything in the inner activity, internally, how is the consciousness operating? Because if the consciousness is operating in a very healthy frequency, everything else will just circulate and move in that perfect way. Kind of like how we know how dis-ease, it starts at a core level somewhere. Well, that core level is an energetic frequency. So once our energy is where we want it to be, everything will circulate into what we want, whether it's a nice body or a nice car or nice everything. Then it's really about working on that frequency within. How is that dialogue every second of the day? It can't have negativity inside of the dialogue if you want just this perfect harmonious reality.
Yeah, totally. I think that's so important, and I feel like I mean, I remember reading about this, and reading about how the outer world is a reflection of the inner world, and how our emotions affect everything around us. But I feel like I wasn't really getting it, and now only recently I'm kind of like, oh, okay, because I'm really, since I started doing a lot more work on myself, and I'm actually seeing the reflection on the outside. So it's like, oh, okay, yes, it really
Yeah.
does work. But it's so
Yes.
hard, because I guess a lot of the things there are a lot of things that are kind of in our subconscious, isn't it, that we're not actually aware of. So
Right.
one level we might be like, oh no, I'm perfectly fine, I've healed, everything. But then on the deeper level, there's other things going on. So how do you approach that? How do you get or how do you know if there is something on the subconscious level that someone is not actually addressing? How does it show to
Right. So definitely healing is a huge, not long process, but it's a process. And the way that I like to explain a healing process is, first of all, we have to accept that whatever we're thinking in our head is there. And once we have accepted this program or this thought pattern of whatever negative thing that we have in our brain, when we accept it, the healing process is we have to be aware of it. We have to be aware that this is actually detrimental to our consciousness. When we've accepted that we're aware of it, then we can understand. When we understand that it's detrimental to our consciousness, we're now creating an emotional connection to know. And that's the last part, is I feel the knowledge of just knowing. It's just knowing that everything is, we've dealt with that, and now it's been healed. But like you said, if something triggers us, oh, I thought I healed it, then it's not fully healed. It hasn't gone through that process of awareness, understanding, and knowledge. Once we hit knowledge is when we're no longer triggered by it, and no longer affects us, or our emotions. We don't have an emotional attachment to it. And that's kind of, and going back to your previous question with the morphogenetic encryption and templating, since I was going as an energy healing, route, I thought I have to know the next level. I got to know the next level of chakra or energy systems, and what is dimension versus frequency. I thought I had to know all of this stuff, when I realized that it's really not about knowing every scientific detail of how energy works. It's really that frequency that you hold. And that's why I kind of just evolved. I kind of took a turn into not so much the science aspect of energy, but how that truly affects humans and the emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical body. Because I feel it's really important to know what spirituality really does and affects a person, versus knowing every detail or the history or who invented this and that. So
Yeah. That so in terms of so do you mean when you're actually with someone, say you're with a client, and they're coming to you with an issue, are you kind of trying not to focus so much on the actual physical side of it, to explain to them how the actual energy works in terms of the scientific way, but more on how they're feeling, so more on the emotional side, and what are the emotions behind these things that are blocking them, kind of thing?
When I'm in a session, I'll do both. But I'm saying, like for my own spiritual journey, I felt that I had to know every single chakra, and what is like how it operates, and every level of dimension and stuff like that. When I was diving too deep into logic, when I really needed to know the purpose and the intent of energy healing, because I feel a healer is more potent, like has their medicines more potent when they have that pure unconditional love frequency, versus a healer who knows a shit ton about templating and chakras and dimension and frequency, but is not as in a high unconditional love frequency, when that's what we're really meant to bring here onto this planet, is that frequency. That new paradigm is coming from heart center. It's not so much knowing everything about energy here logically, but really putting that into use, like that generation of that heart coherence is truly what it is.
Oh, okay. I get it now. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense, because and I have to say, I often fall into that trap of trying to always logicalize everything, and I'm not
Right.
actually feeling it, or I'm not trying to integrate it in my own body. I'm just kind of like, okay, I get it, and then okay, move on to the next thing. But if you're not integrating that knowledge, then there's no point, is there? So
Exactly. Yeah,
yeah, that's so
definitely.
important. Okay, yeah, no, I get that totally. It's very hard though, isn't it? Because the majority of us have spent our lives in our heads, and we're taught from the very beginning, since we're young, think, do. Everything is about the outside world and what you can understand logically. So it's so hard to actually come
Yeah.
down into that feeling space and be present with your emotions, with your heart space, just like you were saying.
And I feel that's kind of where we're at on a global mass level, is the fact that we are going through this awakening. Many people are confused right now because they don't know what to believe. But if that person really went down into the heart coherence, they could listen to themselves. They could listen to the higher selves. But, when some people don't really understand what awakening really is. It's just the fact that we've been asleep this whole time. We've heard that we've been asleep, but asleep meaning we haven't been thinking for ourselves. We haven't been using our discernment. We haven't been using our critical thinking skills to know if the mainstream media, if this is correct or if this is not correct. And so that awakening is really just coming back to the self, and just always knowing that our own self is always correct for our own reality. It may not be correct for every 9 billion people, but it's definitely correct for us.
Mm.
Yeah.
So having that discernment to trust your own intuition again.
Of course, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So one other thing I wanted to really speak to you about. So you work on with abundance and kind of helping people to manifest their abundance. So tell me first, from your perspective, what is abundance? What is money? You know, from sort of the more spiritual side, I guess.
Right. Well, abundance is really everything. The way that I like to explain it is abundance energy, that substance is God in action, or universe in action, source in action. So we think about, well, that current in the river, what makes that move? That's abundance. What makes the circulation in our blood circulate? That's abundance. And waterfalls, wind, that's all abundance. That's the way that I describe it. And many people tie money to it, because of course we can get abundance of money, but we have to really understand how we think of money, our relationship with money. We were always taught, especially in American society, our economic system is based on having Americans live paycheck to paycheck. So if that's all we know, we're trying to find a job where we can live paycheck to paycheck, where every month we're taken care of, when that's not how we should really view money. Our relationship with money is just like the relationship we have with the flow of water. It's just abundance, and kind of like the law of reciprocating, reciprocity. It's always hard for me to say that.
Yeah.
But, Google that law of reciprocity, giving, receiving. When we give without anything expecting in return, that's when multidimensionality happens. I feel our linear mind, like the way that we've always been taught, linear, like X to get to X, Y, or Z. It's like we give, but we have to expect that we're going to get it in return. When we come from the heart, we just surrender, and we know that it will always come back. And that's the law of reciprocity. And I feel like once we can understand that, then we can heal our relationship with money. So that way we can have abundance in that area financially. And something that I've also been evolving towards is not just helping people with mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual, but mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, and financial, because that's a huge part of healing that physical or healing that spiritual. Money has a big play to do with it. So I feel really, once we can see how our relationship, our own personal relationship with money is, we can begin to transform our abundance.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you said that, because I think a lot of us have such a negative association with money. You know, we think a lot of us are like, kind of like, money is evil, money creates war, money is this, money is that. But then it's not the money itself, it's the people who are using the money to create that, isn't it? And equally, we can create amazing things because it's the energy. So the energy with money is how you use it. So I'm really glad that you kind of explained that. Thank you for that. So tell me about your program, because I know you have you've just recently kind of come up with sort of an abundance program that you've been advertising. Tell me a bit about that, and how does it work?
So I have my Ascension coaching program, and that's really the one program that I'm promoting. And within that program, depending on what people come to me for, sometimes it's just spiritual or sometimes it's just financial, but in everyone gets a 40-day prosperity plan. Because for me, along my own journey of practicing and the realization of abundance, there's this book called The Abundance Book by Randolph Price. He's like an old 80s author. It's like a tiny green book, but that tiny green book literally changed my life. And so everything he says there, I implement it into my coaching program on a 40-day prosperity plan. And so it helps people understand their relationship with money, and how, through childhood and emotional traumas, and how that all has to play with the way that we perceive money, like our individual reality. And then that's why the lack of the knowledge of money is why we're experiencing kind of not that abundance flowing in the financial aspect of our lives. So I really help people in that financial aspect in my Ascension Awakening coaching program.
Oh, amazing. And have you seen kind of how was the biggest change in perception that people are having after they work with you on that? So how does it work with them?
I feel everyone is very different the way that they perceive money, especially by the way that they're raised. Some of my clients have just had really great childhoods. You know, their mom and dad have been together, they make good money and stuff like that. But it all comes down to that emotional connection that we've had with money, or the way that our parents have explained what money is. It's all like on the individual person, but once we talk and we sit down, they're able to see that connection, the connecting the dots of why I see money in a negative way. And it's really just pinpointing what do we find negative about money. That way we can transform it into it's all positive. That way we have a positive flow of money coming through. Yeah.
Wow, that sounds like definitely something I want to try.
Yeah, definitely.
Amazing. And from sort of a from a healing standpoint, where do you think money blockages manifest in the body? Because I've heard it's to do with the left side, because the left side is the receiving side. So would you say if people are having issues with their left hand or left leg, maybe they have an abundance block or like a receiving block or
Mm.
something?
So then that again, I feel also depends on the person, because just like you said, you know, our clear senses, every person has psychic abilities, whether they believe it or not, but we're born into, like, we have our primary, secondary, and tertiary clairsensory ability. And many people are familiar with clairvoyance. That means we can see energy, but that doesn't mean we just see colors or people's aura. It's just that energy, if it goes by, we can see it. Then we have clairaudience, where we can hear energy going by, or we can hear the shift of dimensions. You know, our ears pop, stuff like that. And then we have clairsentience, where we just feel the energy. And claircognizance is just like download, like we just get downloads of energy. And so I feel, depending on their people's own psychic abilities, their clairsensory skills, is how they will be affected by blocks, energy blocks, or ascension symptoms. When their body's going through ascension, people could be getting nose stuff, and that's maybe because they're a clairsentient. They just feel energy shifts. You know what I mean? So I feel it all just depends on the person, but always with all my clients, it always goes back to the heart center, is how are we feeling? We have to fully unconditionally love receiving and giving money. And that's really hard. It's not easy, but it's a process. So
No, yeah, it's definitely one of those things where you have to train your mind to do that over and over again, isn't it? To get into that new pattern. And I think they've said
right.
that it takes something like 30 to 40 days to relearn a pattern or to change a pattern or
Yep.
something like that. So
And that's why there's a 40-day prosperity plan, to really shift that consciousness.
oh, I see. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. That sounds amazing. Wow.
And
Okay, so
even if we like think of it as like working out, if we were working out for 40 days, we would for sure see results. If we were doing biceps for 40 days, we'd for sure see toned arms and shoulders. You know what I mean? It's just that muscle memory, or that training of that memory pattern, or that program, and just shifting it.
mm. But yeah, it definitely has to be something that's over a certain amount of time. It's not just something that you just do
Right.
once and then, okay, I'm going to be rich now. Yeah.
It's definitely discipline, for
Yeah.
sure.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow, amazing. And what else? Okay, I wanted to ask you also about what can you tell me about soulmates? Or what do you know from what you've have you kind of delved into it? Because it's such a it's just one of those topics that keeps coming up, but it's kind of like no one really knows anything. Well, no one really knows the details behind it. It was like soulmates, twin flames, and yeah. What do you know about that?
You are so funny. Um, okay, so I mean, I just have my perspective and just from experience and stuff. But so do you mean like relationship in general, or just soulmate?
Just soulmates in general. Yeah.
Soulmate in general, because soulmate can always be like a mix. Like it could be karmic and soulmate, or it could be karmic soulmate and twin flame, or twin flame soulmate. You know, there's just these different levels. But soulmate, you know, it could be like you and I could be soulmates. We could be soul sisters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what do you mean exactly?
I just wanted to know the difference between well, kind of what the purpose is behind them. And do you think now
Oh,
a lot more people are kind of, a lot more soulmates are kind of finding each other, not necessarily in a relationship, but just in general? Do you think a lot more soul, or people who are from the same soul group are kind of now starting to come together, because it seems like, everyone's starting to become a lot more aware? And yeah.
right. Yes. So that definitely comes into play with understanding karmic relationships. And I feel a lot of star seed and light workers, we come onto this planet with our family as karmic. A lot of our family, like our mom, our dad, brother, and sister, is a lot of karma. Like we have to learn a lot of karma with them. And once, our soul begins to awaken and we're beginning to go through our ascension, our frequency begins to become a much grander frequency of ourselves. And so when our frequency is very grand, remember, if we think about the invisible realm, it's a grand energy that's only going to attract that same frequency of grand energy. And that's probably why you and I have met within the last few months versus 2 years ago. We could have both still been into what we're doing, but it's our frequency that's beginning to rise, to really magnetize towards us. And I feel that's so true because in 2018, I started to use Instagram, and that's when my awakening really blew up. And so I got in contact with so many soul family members, a lot of soul sisters that I have never even met like physically, but I feel such a strong connection. Like, oh, for sure, we've had many past lives together. Like we've totally been healers in other lives. And it's just that something, that just feeling, that resonation we feel in our heart of just, I don't know why, but I totally know I feel you. Like I know you,
Yeah.
and that's how soulmates, they feel each other. That relationship, kind of in the movies where it's like they're fall in love and just like, I don't know why, but I just know you. It's just like that. But now it's just kind of a normal now because we're waking up into that heart coherence. Sorry. Maybe that's confirmation
Yeah,
too.
maybe it is. There you go.
Yes, that heart coherence, that like that's what resonating is does our heart feel it? If our heart feels it, then it's true, you
Yeah.
know.
Oof, that's deep. Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. Yeah. So what you feel with your heart rather than what your logic is telling you, it might be good for you. So yeah.
Right, yes.
Wow, amazing. So I know I asked you in the forum before if there's any sort of a short meditation or something you can do that to, like a tip that people can take away and use in their own life. So do you have anything for us today?
Yes, I definitely have a tip for everyone who is watching. When you guys are doing a meditation, I highly recommend invoking the violet flame energy. And the violet flame energy is one of the most highest frequency, most potent energy for healing through every energetic level, whether it's physical, emotional, spiritual, mental, all of that. It transmute anything that's of a lower frequency, and it automatically turns that into unconditional love frequency. So the violet flame, if you ever are going into meditation, which we can do right now, would you like to do one?
Yeah, I think we should.
Okay, awesome. So before we do, I'll just explain that with the violet flame energy, we just envision it within our heart and we begin to expand it out. And we can expand it out to every human or the entire planet or whatever we want. But I really recommend the violet flame energy. So when you're ready, we can start. Okay, so let's just close our eyes and take a nice deep breath. And if you want to, maybe we can put our hands on our heart and really feel this source inside of our body, physically feel our heart center. Just take a nice deep breath in and out. Inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth. And now wherever we're at, let's bring our consciousness from our head down to our hearts. And let's always remain here during this entire meditation, that we stay centered and grounded inside of our heart. And with every inhale, I would like you to invoke this violet flame, this violet energy coming through from the center of your heart. Inhale. And as you exhale, you're letting this out into your aura, into your field, into the planet. And with every conscious breath, this violet flame begins to grow stronger and radiate brighter inside of the body, transmuting and healing everything inside of the body and everything outside, the external reality. Inhale and exhale. Always staying in our heart space during this meditation and always creating a radiation of violet flame energy from the inner to the outer. Inhale and exhale. And just always know that we can always come back to this space, this state of consciousness, this container for healing to occur any moment we'd like. And maybe just being in gratitude and just thanking yourself for this moment of violet flame energy healing and the transmuting of all energies that do not serve you for your highest good to be transformed into healing now. And then when you're ready, you can bring your consciousness back up to your head, to your third eye. Wiggle your fingers, your toes, and lastly, you can open your eyes.
Wow, that was so amazing.
Oh, good.
Oh, that was really incredible. It was so short, but it was so potent. Like you could really, I think just having that going from your head to your heart and just focusing on your heart and then just imagining that violet flame, that color, which I
Yes.
love. Violet is my favorite color, by the way. So yeah, I should definitely start doing that more often. Wow, that was really
Yeah.
amazing. Thank you.
You're so welcome. I really felt that energy shift too. And usually, when you open your eyes and everything's a little lighter, everything's a little hazy, it's just that your consciousness is just coming back down to this plane of existence. But that should let you know, that's physical evidence that your consciousness is very at a high frequency and it's slowly just coming back down to this plane of existence. So there's a much physical evidence to just portray that our consciousness is always fluctuating, kind of like water. If we have a buoy and the water is moving, our consciousness is this buoy and it's always up or down, up or down. And so it's really our responsibility to make sure that we're anchored in somewhere higher, a very high frequency that we can obviously operate at. We don't want to be too high where we're not grounded.
Yeah.
And that's where that anchor comes into place, where we can be grounded but still in a high frequency.
Wow, that was really potent. Thank you for that.
Oh, you're so
Wow.
welcome.
Jasmine, so any last words, and also where can people find you if they want to take any of your amazing abundance courses or any of your try out some of your coaching, life coaching?
Oh, thank you. I'm just so glad to be here and share with you. And I'm really excited for the future and for all of these beautiful people that magnetize towards this video or to really reconnect back with us both. And so everything is all in divine timing. And I would just like to say that you can find me on Instagram is where I'm most active, at Starseed Mystery School. And then my website links are also posted on my About Me there. And then you can find me on YouTube as well as Starseed Mystery School, as I'm usually interviewing other Starseeds lightworkers just like this. It's a great platform just to reconnect with each other, our soul family. And other than that, my website is theflowerjasmine.com. And that's all.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time, and
Well,
hopefully
thank
we'll catch up
you.
again. We'll do another live soon in a few months when
Oh,
everything
yes,
shifted.
for sure. I would love that.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, guys, for
Thank
watching. Bye.
you.